I am Blake Bertuccelli-Booth, and I'm recently married, so I have a booth appended to my Bertuccelli. I am a kind of weird guy, people call me that, and I was kind of annoyed by that label until I turned 33, which was my Jesus year. And I realized that being weird is actually a pretty big asset when you get beyond the high school kind of dynamics of life. And I'm pretty excited by a lot of the weird work I'm doing. So I have a bunch of different links to show everybody, and I'm going to try to get this done within 10 minutes because conversation is really the most important aspect of any event with human beings. So I just want to introduce some of my world, introduce the work that I'm passionate about, that I think is highly impactful, and really have a conversation with you. I'm really also big on English politics. I think parliamentary procedure is really cool, and like I said, and I'm really into the idea of questions, which I think Parliament is kind of built around. So I'm going to also ask a big question at the end, and it's my prerogative to get it answered. But if the conversation goes someplace else, that's cool too. So I have this notion. Anybody can log into it. I'm super open. I'm on this Greatest Good tour right now. I think the website is bertucc.notion.site if you want to check out my life. So this is totally open. Maybe it is. I don't know. We'll see. And yeah, there it is. It's totally open. I have things like my Udemy notebook, where you can see some of the things that I'm into, that I'm working on. Through this notebook, there's an introduction. You can kind of click into Udemy. I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's all in Notion, so the operating principles. My whole world's there. I pretty much set it up with help from my good friend, Mr. KX Wizard, who's here today. I spent probably 2 years trying to figure out what I wanted, with just concerted asking myself that question every day. And what I really want is Udemy. And what goes into that, a big piece of that, is openness. So one of the key aspects of my existence is to promote openness, to be open. And I was talking to Hacknight earlier. I like to consider myself radically open. And I'm kind of a radical of openness. I sent a bunch of people my social security number recently. And I do this because the things in my life that I feel are the best things, and it's selfish, and I know it's selfish, but the best things in my life came through learning, and came through learning things in really weird ways, just not through the books or the ideas that people wanted to teach me, but through the strange connections that happen, and the amazing poetry that comes up when you're just walking through a street and you meet somebody. And I hate curated information, and that's why it's also kind of weird having this, but I just throw it all in here anyway. So that leads to accessibility, right? So the internet is a lot of information. Hacknight said a quote earlier that life is information. And I realized after being a web developer for the best part of my life, which is probably my youth, I realized that if I was going to be Jesus and preach some gospel, I had to preach the gospel of openness. And if I was going to do that in a way that spoke to as many human beings as possible, we're kind of beyond the religion thing, so I have to make a startup. And in making a startup, my startup is going to preach the gospel of openness through the language of accessibility, and that's what I'm going to do. So I created this thing called Equalify. It's a totally open source project. Literally the source code is all right here. I made it as simple as I possibly could. I big WordPress background, and also a lot of other technologies, but WordPress was a community I was really into. And I was I want to make a accessibility scanner that a person who has PHP experience can dig into, use, start manipulating. That's totally easy, because there's really nothing out there that allows a human being who isn't working for a company, who's looking at the proprietary code base, or really advanced in certain kind of hard languages to use. So I created this system that, let's use startup language because we're into startup land now, that disrupts the way people deal with accessibility. So currently, folks, to scan an entire website, there are a few technologies, but they're not really quite there. There's one called Pally, there's a few others. But there's nothing that like literally out of the box will scan your entire website for accessibility issues. And accessibility issues, just for like to back up, there are guidelines called the WCAG guidelines that say this is what defines an accessible website. This is how you can make a website ready for screen readers. This is how you can make a website ready for people with different vision impairments. And those guidelines are pretty kind of set in this WCAG rulebook. And you can automatically test for about 67% of those guidelines. And so what Equalify does is it will test websites for accessibility errors, for the places that they violate these guidelines. And currently, the solutions that people are using to do this testing cost a lot of money. The contracts, the higher ed institutions, nonprofits, anybody who has to be accessible, because under law you have to meet certain accessibility requirements if you're taking government money or providing a government service. The testing solutions are very, very expensive. A higher ed organization told me that they had the option to either hire someone, a person to teach the community about accessibility, or pay for one of these services that just scanned websites. And they had to go with the service that scanned websites instead of to hire the person, which any accessibility person will tell you that at the end of the day, you do, like, the technology is not quite there to scan in a way a human being would do. So that was like a big thing. This was a very big university too. So that the university doesn't have an accessibility professional because they had to spend an exorbitant amount of money for the scanner was like an eye-opening experience to me. I built this project in about 4 or 5 months. A lot of contributors helped. My brother, who's here via Zoom, also helped, but we have 7 pretty adamant contributors. Jonathan Camp was a big early one, and most of them are around higher ed. So I built this project, and then going through the gospel of startups, I was like, oh, I got to pivot because it's not meeting X, Y, Z. And what I realized was I built a really good front-end system. I built a system that, if you know basic WordPress, if you know basic Drupal, you can get in here, start extending, start using. But it wasn't. There was some features that were taking it that would take this project to a next level that I was missing because different issues around speed and around accuracy require like more language, more computing power than something like PHP can offer. Which I wrote this in a language called PHP. And when I realized this, I started looking around for opportunities to do it. And my goal really is to scan the entire internet. And PHP just doesn't have the processing power. It would cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to use PHP to do it. So I found another project called AliWatch, which is a really cool project. And this project, AliWatch, was built largely in a language called Rust. And it's pretty brilliant. And running AliWatch, it ran about 100 to 1,000 times faster than any scan out there. And it was mostly open source. Mostly is a keyword here. And I was amazed by the product. This guy, Jeff Mendez, put it together. It's a great thing. And all of a sudden, my mind started going at the 1,000 times speed that AliWatch was going. I was like, oh my God. Not only can I build an open source system that is free at the point of use, that means like anybody can use it, but I can also build the fastest system and the most accurate system. So I can also advance the entire ecosystem of website accessibility scans. So all of a sudden, the dream of scanning the entire internet can be possible using some of this software as a back end, and then my software as a front end. And like that was like the any startup person who gets in front of me like, that is the moment that I was like, whoa, this is my like mission on Earth, or whatever they said. And so for the last several months, what I've been doing is working to put AliWatch in a backend component and making it more accessible to contribution with my piece, Equalify, as a front-end component, making it usable for folks who don't necessarily know those languages. And also it's in a UX that's a little bit more focused on the missions at hand. And today, right now, right here, I have the results. So we've been working for a few weeks on basically pulling these two worlds together. AliWatch is a great thing, awesome project, and it's like run by this amazing artist of a craftsman developer. It's just not quite in the open source world, so we're pulling it together in the open source world. So I created something called the next step in what I'm doing. I'm calling WCAT. And WCAT is a play on the web content accessibility guidelines. I'm actually creating web content accessibility tools. And like the key around WCAT is that all of this technology we want to make free at the point of use and open, and also more amazing than anything out there. So long story short, we finally today started to put the pieces together. So I know there's both technical and non-technical people in the audience, so I want to be conscious of both. I also have 3 minutes left. This is the product. I can, within a few seconds, scan any website. So let's do equalify.dev. And this process normally takes like 10, 15 minutes on any other service. If a university is paying $100,000 to a company, I'll just name them Site Improve. Literally, look, I just did it in 3 seconds. Like, it's bizarrely quick, and the more you do it, the faster it gets. So now it's at like a milliseconds time. Like, this is just weird that I'm showing you right now. This doesn't happen, and like the possibilities of this mean I can scan giant websites. Like we were working with va.gov, huge, gigantic websites. I was talking with people from Princeton, and they were complaining that their accessibility scanner team said it would take a month and a half to scan their entire website. We did it on the Zoom call. So it was, and like their minds went, like all of a sudden they were like, oh, that's wrong. And I said, oh, send you the JSON. Look, here are all the errors. Oh, look, we even have more accuracy than the people you spent $100,000 on and took a month and a half. So like this is earth-shattering right here. There are complications to it. Like when you're doing it this fast, they have to make sure they're on like a server that can handle that. But but this is pretty bonkers. Like what I'm showing you here, if you've ever done a scan before, like this is crazy. The front end component of this is a lot easier to use. And like literally, like I was on a call right before finishing this with my brother. So this is Equalify, and basically what I did was my brother and I hooked in AliWatch into Equalify and then kind of like updated it a bit so that it would work for open source systems. And like with Equalify, we can have different kind of scan profiles. So you can create one of an XML for an XML sitemap, for a single page, for a crawl, whatever we want. And then you click scan, and basically this is a crawl. So this is going through all of the different pages in equalify.app. It's like looking through everything. It's going from one page to another page to another page to another page to another page. And as it does this, it's also recording all the information. So it did all of the different information in equalify.app. And in 13 seconds, it recorded 245 different errors. And I just did this before, so it's not new stuff. And then it's reporting them out as alerts. So the cool thing about Equalify that we do is like it's like an email box, so you have all the alerts here, and then if you fix the alert, the next time you scan, it'll automatically be in the Equalify section. So this is what I'm working on. It's pretty cool, pretty groundbreaking. It's definitely like, I feel like I did my 33rd year right, because this is kind of like the thing I want to proselytize for the next however long it takes to get everybody using this on the internet. And I thank you, PackCon, for letting me be here. Thank you. I think we're opening it to questions. Is that next? Any questions? Comments? It doesn't even have to be about this. I mean, like if you're not into this, yeah.
It's not just about WordPress.
What's that?
It's not just about WordPress.
Oh, no. So the relationship to WordPress that this has is that the code base that I built all of this on, like, well, I don't know if you're familiar, but like WordPress has a lot of developers who contribute to it and use it because the code base is really easy to understand. Like, I kind of took some lessons when I was building my code base so that anybody can write a plugin for this thing. So like you can literally write you could write a new plugin that says like, do this with it. And like, I just built the language and the framework so you could do that. And you do that very easily. And you don't even really know, you don't even know how to code really. You just have to kind of follow like most WordPress developers don't have any kind of computer science interest. They're just like cobbling things together. The framework that I'm creating allows you to just cobble things together and it should work.
I want to ask that, can you show us some of the accessibility issues that you just gave?
Yeah, totally.
And then I would like to know, like, if I'm a user, once I scan it, how can I try to address on it? Because one thing, as a small thing doing open source project, a lot of time is, yeah, I know our accessibility is not quite good, but it just takes so much effort to actually improve it. So I would like to know how it might work.
So the typical process is a person using this is an accessibility manager. So they don't know how to code, but they will send stuff to developers. So for instance, if the manager, and you can create reports with this system that like focus on particular things. So if the manager only wants to look at images, for instance, they could go through this and just look at images. But let's just take anything. So this particular error is around a skip link, right? And the manager, who's an accessibility professional, knows that that's going to go to a developer. And so what the typical usage is, they would send this to the developer, and the developer would fix this. Then the manager would then run the scan again, and if it's fixed, it'll show up in this Equalify area.
Oh, okay, so this will send to developers and help the developers to identify which part the codes are missing or something.
Yeah, so like right here is where the code snippet is.
Yeah.
So they would look for this code snippet. And a lot of times a developer might just look at like the message itself. Because the message itself, skip to content link not found, use a skip to content link. A developer who's dealt with this before would like say, oh, okay, we gotta put that in. And then has a little code snippet to show you how. But developers mostly look at this. There are most of the errors are for people who are developing the code.
Yeah.
But other stuff, so like what we're trying to integrate with right now is for end users who are like, if you're like entering a blog, and as you enter in the blog, if you have errors, it'll tell you in a more visual way. This is just a first step, and this is what most people are, when somebody who's familiar with accessibility sees this is what they're used to, pretty much.
Cool. Can you go back to the standard file for the whole? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so here you would add in, if you want to scan an XML sitemap, you can do that, a single page, or you can have it crawl your site.
This will be definitely very useful. Like just like during COVID, some of the websites I'm working with, they have a problem is that the government puts the button as an image, so that you cannot use Google Translation to translate a page.
Yeah.
And that creates a lot of issues for people who don't understand the official language of that country.
Yeah.
And we were trying very hard time telling them how to change that or to check it, which buttons go wrong in the hospital, because they're usually like ages, like components on the website, and then it's hard to actually find it.
Well, like one of the things that we tell people who are like not into accessibility is like it's more than just disabled people. It's more than just screen readers. So like the accessibility guidelines, first of all, are for people with like temporary disabilities, situational disabilities, age-related disabilities. It's everyone. When you get older, you can't see as well. So it's like this is not like a small potatoes thing. The other thing we tell people is that bad accessibility is bad business. You know, $23 billion is the number that business people say have lost revenue. $6.6 billion is a pretty good number because you can actually see the lawsuits, and then like tarnished brand. So like everybody should care about accessibility, not only because the government is saying they're going to sue you, but because like everybody's going to need to. We all get old, eyesight degrades, you know, fingers get hard to touch, and if we have better software out there to both test it and to like bring the user into use of the content, like the UI will change. Like we will have dynamic content that works, that tells it your reading level and changes towards you, different things like that. That will happen. This is positioned to be in that space and to anticipate it.
Ian did have to jet for a call with San Francisco people on San Francisco hours, so I was gonna just help. Is there one more question before? Like, are you open to like host a regular discussion?
Yeah, whatever else you need.
Okay, so knowing, is there any other questions though?
Just one question. What's the so you changed between like a product and open source a couple of times. So I assume this is both like a startup and open source on the code. So what's the monetization model for this? So is this still going to be open source and you're selling additional stuff, or are you selling just services?
So we have open source. I'm only going to do things open source. Like I'm never going to work with an investor or anybody that says anything can be closed source. And like that's controversial. Some people don't work that way. Most investors won't invest in that company. Like I have no interest in doing any work that everybody can't access that is not free at the point of use. Like it just doesn't interest me. So I'm not going to do it. I'm looking at a sustainability model of like sustaining that code. To sustain that code, there are two ways. First way is support contracts. Large organizations want to pay us to make sure that the stuff works. So, and it's pretty decent pieces. The second is like, that's the main piece. And then the second one is like managed services. So we'll host it, and people will pay us to host the stuff that's open source. But all of the pieces are there. I mean, I'm sure that there will be an ecosystem around it where people are paid to like develop plugins and things that work. But those are the two things. And like this is actually a perfect question, because my big thing of like what the hell do I do is how do I sustain this dealio? And like on a very nitpicky thing of like, does anybody know anybody that like really needs accessibility, because like happy to like work on it, and like we have a great team, and like I just want people to use this. So like that is my ask of like who do you know who can like either wants to use this or would pay for using it? And like it's like a weird question to ask, because most people don't like to talk about business, but also like it's like a necessary question, because if tools like this are going to be made, like there's going to need to be like a basic level of sustainability for the people working on it. Like the developers who are working on it now, like I'm both like throwing some cash at it, and there's a lot of volunteerism. That isn't how open source projects are sustained in the long run. So, and I'm just kind of like in the moment of like, what the freak do I do? So that's my big question and ask of like, who do you know? Who can I speak to? And that's the best way to help, I think, at this moment. Beyond contributing code, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Blake.
Yeah.